And moving right along, it is a great pleasure to welcome our first speaker here today. Lucy Shea is the Group CEO of Futerra. Now that's a change agency think tank based in the UK, and they have deep expertise in sustainability. And Yvonne mentioned what customers that a lot of you are watching what your customers are asking for. And she's going to give us a little bit of food for thought on why the largely purpose-driven marketing of the past maybe 10 to 15 years isn't really cutting the mustard anymore. Consumers, of course, as you know, are also under multiple pressures when it comes to choosing which products to buy, and hardly surprising that Gen Z and even younger generations have extremely different priorities than the previous target audiences that we were familiar with. So when you ask yourself, do they even care if this stuff is green? Well, the answer is yes, but they want you to be telling them why it's better and what the benefits are. So put your hands together for Lucy Shea, who's going to tell you more about that.
Thank you, Karen.
Do you have a clicker here, I think?
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you
That's
so
for
much. Well, hello, Team Solutions. I feel we've got a lot of people in the room really focused on that. Now, let's just see. This is working. Okay, great. Thank you for the warm and kind introduction. And I loved the word cloud stuff to start with. In fact, I actually wondered if it seemed to be a lot of people from Sweden. I don't know if that was the first name that came in or just, so I felt I should say, hello, Sweden at the start. But hello and a warm welcome to everyone. So, yes, I'm the CEO of Futerra, and we are very fortunate at Futerra. We get to work with some brilliant brands and partners all over the world, and a lot, to use the terminology here today, a lot of the brand owners, if you like, have been our very good friends and partners for over the last 20 years. So Futerra's been going for over 20 years. We are a B Corporation. We actually have climate solutions provider status from the UN under Race to Zero. We're majority female owned and run. And the way that we work, as touched upon, is, I seem to have a slight delay here. Does it go back? It goes back. Let's go. It goes forward. Great. We work as a change agency, so that's a consultancy, professional services. We work as a think tank. We have an academy training arm, and we also have a non-profit, which is set up to work on culture and how to activate culture to tackle climate change. So we have spent a very long time looking at all of the consumer research out there on what motivates people around sustainability and climate, and particularly in a business context. Now, my fonts seem to... Well, we'll go over that slide quite quickly because my fonts aren't there. But the question I get asked for the last 20 years, well, I get asked two questions a lot. One is, do consumers give a damn? Do they actually really care? And the second one is, what's the business case on this? So we're actually going to put those two together. And obviously that's so much what we're hearing today with the other speakers. So do consumers care? Well, yes, they do. They really do. Here's some Futerra research. I mean, you will have seen many research along these lines that 98% of people that we asked said that they think that brands have a responsibility to make a positive impact in the world. And even more than that, they actually would like some help. So some survey that we did at the start of the pandemic asked consumers if they would actually like help in leading a more sustainable lifestyle. And a whopping 88% said yes. Now, at this moment, I'm going to pause and say, possibly you might be thinking, oh, but they say they do and then they don't pay more or buy my green product or think that my new sustainable packaging innovation is the best thing they have ever seen. What is going on? And actually, I know that many of you will be dealing with the fact that perhaps your CEO, your board, your bosses might be saying, you told me they pay more for these things. What is going on? And then it's very customary to turn to this thing called the value action gap. So this basically says that consumers say one thing in surveys, but don't translate that into behavior. Now, there's a whole lot of behavioral psychology out there that actually it's way easier to change what you think than what you do. So this thing gets compounded if you actually point out to people the difference between what they say they care about and what they're doing. But it's this big thing, the value action gap, which, basically says the consumers are lying. We call it the morality gap myth, because actually, if you look at the market out there, if you look at what consumers say that they care about, and if you look at actually then what gets presented to consumers, you can see it is not a gap. It is not a simple value action gap. It is one enormous barrier. So basically, sitting between these intended latent market demand and then the actual take-up, sustainable lifestyles, purchasing, whatever it may be, sits, actually, a set of barriers. Now, we play this with our clients and partners quite a lot. It's called barrier bingo. So if you look at some of the barriers here, as a person, you might be thinking, some of these actually ring true to me when I think about buying an EV, when I think about, putting solar on my home, when I think about even trying that vegan new fancy dish. You might be finding yourself faced with barriers of availability, of price, of habit, or even some of the softer but absolutely crucial ones, such as embarrassment or shame or just not knowing how the darn thing works. So we have this enormous set, and all taken from the psychological evidence base. Fatalism, does it even make a difference? Preference, myths, habits. There are an enormous amount of barriers to change. As humans, we actually don't like to change very much. There's this thing called punctuated equilibrium, which basically says we will keep doing our behaviours, in that rut until it almost becomes too uncomfortable, at which point we change and change rapidly. So we've got this value action gap has been a real morality gap, has been a real wrong turn, if you like, that we've all been down. And actually looking at these barriers are going to get you to a much more effective place. And I would encourage you, and we use these, for example, we were doing a piece of work with a very big consumer goods cosmetics company, one of the biggest in Europe and the States. And before they'd introduced a low carbon packaging solution into the market, had spent about $1 gazillion on marketing it, and the take-up was exceptionally low. So when relaunching, what we did was kind of insert between the innovation process and launching it to do some behavioural research into the actual barriers to those consumers taking up that low carbon packaging solution. Think about one of the naming no names, but some of the biggest search engines we've got out there. What are the behavioural barriers to people taking up the more green flight option or green hotel option, whatever it may be? So this is a really useful tactic for your marketing teams to use. Now, the other reason I say send it to your marketing teams, and there may be some in the room as well, is something happens with marketing and sustainability where it fries marketing teams' minds. That actually marketeers know really well how to promote brands, laser focus on benefits to the consumer. But when it comes to sustainability, because it's seen as really important, we tend to get a little bit mushy. So we tend to get a little bit kind of purpose and cause-led. And so this has seemed to be a bridge between this latent demand of values and people saying they care, and then the gap between action. What we've tended to see is a lot of purpose and cause marketing, try and fill that gap. But this is ego marketing, and it is rife. And again, it wins awards at Cannes. Agencies tend to really like it. In fact, we did some research, again at Futerra, looking at last year, a review of over 100 award-winning sustainability campaigns, and just looking to see if there was any consumer benefit in any of those campaigns. And we were quite generous with our ratings. So we looked at Cannes, the Webbies, Effie's, a ton, as I say, over 100. And actually, well, you can see here, 45% had no consumer benefit at all. And only a quarter had strong consumer benefits. So you could see that, 75% basically have got weak or no consumer benefits. And it now starts to make a bit more sense, because if you look out there, almost every study you see will say consumers saying, we'd like this. We still don't get the larger mainstream adoption of these things. We see some amazing breakthrough brands doing well at this. We'll have a look at that in a minute. That actually what we're missing is selling eco-benefits. The benefits, what it is that this new innovation, product, packaging, etc., gives to the consumer. And this holds true across demographics, across ages, but particularly for the newer audiences coming through. So again, some Futerra research on a piece called The Honest Product, looking at transparency and what consumers actually want information on. And people told us loud and clear, they don't want the voice being lent, they don't want issues being talked about. They would just like you to make the products better, to make them more, this was with a sustainability lens, and to make them better for the consumer. And, taking a little moment to where we find ourselves now, as Karen touched upon and our brilliant speakers just now did, it is harder out there in terms of cost of living. It is more politicised in some markets than it's ever been. But actually making your product better, linking it to your business benefit, your fiduciary duty, and how it makes it better to the consumer can help to sidestep a lot of that. So what are some ways you can do that? Well, the way to smash through those barriers, those gazillions of barriers, is product benefits. Product or service or even packaging benefits. And I'm going to dare to introduce a new acronym, because from my, so far, not enormous knowledge of Leondale, I'm picking up that this is important. So I'm going to give you FES, functional, emotional, and social. Now, these are the different benefits that you can lean on when marketing your new innovation. And now the functional ones are, I wouldn't say well served, but they are there in sustainability marketing. You'll recognize some of these. The emotional and social ones, far less so. So functional will be things such as, can your product give better health? Can it give better value for money? Can it save energy? Can it save time? Can it give efficiency? What can it do to functionally make the consumer, that end consumer's life, a little bit better, a little bit easier, a little bit more value for money, a little bit cheaper, whatever it may be, functional benefits. As I say, well, I'll give you an example of those in a minute. Those we see a bit of. The emotional and social ones, far less of. So emotional are things such as, can your product give more pleasure? Can it give greater comfort, excitement, a feeling of heightened self-worth? Can it give, can you personalize? That's a big kind of emotional one. Can you help with increased happiness? What can your product do? What can your marketing around your product do to give that emotional benefit? And finally, social. This is different to emotional. It talks about how people can look good in the eyes of others, or how they can build greater connections or networks or collaboration. So can you help with your marketing, build stronger relationships, help that end consumer look more desirable, become more desirable, appear cooler or smarter, give a sense of belonging or community? There are lots of different functional, emotional, and social benefits you can work through. And again, for those marketeers in the room, or when you get back to home base and you bring this to your marketeers, they'll be well used to working through this. This is how really effective product and service marketing works. So let's have a look at a couple of examples just to bring it really to life, and to talk a little bit about how that business benefit can be linked. If you kind of get this, if you manage to nail this, bring your sustainability attributes and link it to benefits. So this is one of Chanel's products. Very high end, extremely expensive. It's a moisturizer that basically the moisturizer is in that pot, that little gold pot, but around it sits this enormous, very resource intensive packaging. And what Chanel have done is they still sell this enormous, resource intensive packaging with this little pot in the middle, and I think it's about, I don't know, €700. I mean, it is an enormous amount of money. But now they've innovated that you can just buy the little refill pot, which is your product basically, that can now slip in and out of that packaging. It is, and it's priced at, let's say €500. So, the benefit to the consumer is this whole thing looks amazing. It's designed to be kind of shown. It's high status and all the rest of it, but you can also save money. There's an actual functional benefit. You can save $200 by basically buying the refill rather than the packaging. Now, for Chanel, this makes perfect sense. Their margin cost on selling the little pot is so much better that it's delivering enormous business benefits. So thinking about how you can promote these things in ways that tie to whatever your marketing spend, your margin, your products, your resource selection, etc., there are ways to link that consumer benefit to your business benefit as well. So that's a functional example. Very successful at the moment. Another one. And again, I can feel you all thinking it. It's like emotional benefit. Can we do this with plastics and polymers? Yes, you can. Because if you can do it with loo roll, you can do it with anything. So this is, do you get who gives a crap here? Okay. So, yeah. Is that someone who's like, I use it? So who knew you could revolutionise toilet roll with some emotional marketing? So this marketing is a bit coarse. I give you that. So it talks about how this tissue is basically all recycled, all made in wonderful ways, but also supports community projects around the world. Access to hygiene and toilets is a huge issue around health, so it supports projects around that. But the marketing around it, it's all subscription, and it's all personalised, and it talks about how you become, your bum becomes an absolute hero just for purchasing this product. So enormous sense of heightened self-worth in a, let's say, somewhat neglected area of marketing. And this is one of these we call them born good brands that is just accelerating and growing at a rate of knots. So again, you can take some very tricky and challenging areas and still manage to get that emotional connection. And then finally on social, I don't know if any of you are big fans of Love Island. Any hands up for Love Island watchers? Okay, right, well, this is some new information. So Love Island, a couple of years ago, had a big partnership with eBay to essentially get rid of single-use plastics. So get rid of single-use plastics within the Love Island territory. So for that, you probably still know the idea. People go to an island, they hook up, it's reality TV. Everyone's loving it. But in this show, not only did they basically used their kind of cultural influence and impact to target some areas which, again, hadn't necessarily been met. So they made the island a plastic-free zone, or a single plastic-free zone, and then partnered up with eBay that people could buy products that would displace single-use plastics, so things like your water bottle that goes on, and people could personalise them. So there was an enormous amount of thought that had gone into what is it that's going to help our viewer, our end user, look good in their communities. Enormous social media influencer outreach, and now, top of mind, these audiences and demographics will talk about getting rid of single-use plastics and being very proud to have their water bottle. It's the demographic that, the whole David Attenborough show didn't reach, basically, is now targeted with this. So my final slide is to say, again, if you can manage to, rather than necessarily communicate about what you're doing on sustainability and how it makes your business brilliant and a hero, if you can make your consumer the hero, the end consumer the hero, it is almost, if you only remember one thing, that is the one thing to remember. So who knows what this delightful shoe here is? Anyone recognise this? I've got any hands up? It didn't get enormous market penetration. If you look very carefully, you can see the Nike tick, the Nike swoosh. This was when, sorry guys, no offense, this was when the sustainability team did the marketing of Nike's first low-impact shoe. So, good friend of ours, ex-CSO of Nike, Hannah Jones, now at the Earthshot Prize, good friend of ours at Futerra's. She was the one that, popularised the term, there is no sustainability department, we're the innovation department. So a bit before her time, enormous work at Nike to, just as we heard earlier, to really bring down their circular play, but also to decarbonise, to actually look at every single material and input use along the production chain for their shoe and how they could make it more sustainable. And the first result was this one. I think now they're actually worth quite a lot. You can get one on eBay for like $1,000 type of thing, but didn't go anywhere. The Flyknit, in comparison, was same thinking behind it. So we're going to lightweight, we're going to decarbonise, we're going to take the material inputs down by 45 to 60%. But the benefit it was sold on was on performance. So as the shoe was lighter, it improved running times. And the Nike, everyone's an athlete. So it was designed for everyone to be able to perform better. Loads of emotional and social kind of marketing around it as well. But that functional benefit was drilled home from the get-go. So, if you only remember one thing, make your consumer the hero, get your sustainability attributes in, but don't talk about those. Talk about what they give your consumer. And forget about the brown swoosh. We're all about the Flyknit now. So that's it in terms of presentation. Karen, I'll pass to you to come up and we'll maybe take some questions.
Let's have a round of applause for you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that very interesting presentation. Ego marketing, first of all, was a new term for me, and I thought we could start with let's start with a round of barrier bingo, because that sounded really wonderful. We have a question prepared for the audience, and maybe we can just pull that up, Paolo, and once we see it here, I'll get Lucy to sort of have a look at what you come up with. So we thought we'd ask you, what is the key barrier for your organization to communicate sustainability claims to consumers? So we saw all those wonderfully illustrated barriers that Lucy had there. Let's see what comes up from this group. And maybe you can give us some insight.
Shame and preference and cost and availability, habits, myths, preference,
price.
Yeah,
big one when it comes to those greener flights.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I know I've hesitated a couple of times on those. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
I like it when they two come together. So, this is the more efficient one, clearly, because it's cheaper and it's green.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're starting to get some response there.
Great.
Humility. That's a very interesting.
We do, the greenwashing is a big fear at the moment, and also we do a lot of work in the Nordics, and this green hush issue is always there as well. So making sure that you walk the walk before you talk the talk, And actually, just to kind of spend a moment on that, that's really smart at the moment because it's always been a good idea. Don't overreach and overstate what you're able to do. That's common sense. But the compliance space now means, you can't make lofty goals anymore, statements, without actually having full KPIs, LCAs, all the way along the line that would show you can fulfill that. So that's also smart. Plus the Green Claims Code, I heard a moment of everyone freezing and saying it's in Italian legislation already, I think. It's one of the only markets where it's actually now already in. So all of that I think is really smart. One of the bits of advice I'd give is, again, if you talk less about your what you've done and more about what this gives your consumer, it's a really nice sidestep because it means you don't have to crow and be hubristic. You can say, we've done this for you, this is for you, or this gives you this. And the other piece I'd say, the reason I showed some of that creator influencer marketing is that, again, in this very politicized, sometimes dangerous area to be communicating in, that type of marketing means you can pick your channel. You don't just need to broadcast to everyone. You can choose to post your information where you think the most receptive audience will be. So that can sometimes be a way around that as well. Okay. Am I talking too much? Should we come to some questions?
No, it's very, very interesting to hear that particular concern. I'm just wondering if you can expand for the audience on how cultural is it cultural to some extent, ego marketing, because it strikes me that it's a very sort of Anglo-Saxon British thing to want to not be a crower.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, as we know, and you're always we hear this kind of debate going on in a lot of fora. So is it cultural to a degree? And can you give us just a couple more examples of ego marketing so that we can actually identify it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is cultural. What I've observed over the years is, and I don't know if it was some lazy cultural stereotyping on my behalf, but certainly what I've noticed over the years is there's been more demand from, let's say, US markets to speak get reputational benefit than necessarily you might say some of the Nordic markets, as an example. Mm-hmm. What I think that started to flatten a little bit because we were in a position a few years back where we had two different packaged goods companies, one US-led and one European-led, and we had two briefs going on at the same time where a European team had their they were going to see their US CEO, and they wanted to tell the US CEO, we still need to communicate in Europe. This is really important. We've got all this green claim stuff coming, but we get massive consumer benefits. We've done so much hard work, we don't want to stop. And then we had exactly the same thing happening on the other side of the pond. We had a US team who had their European CEO visiting him, like, we need to tell him that we still need to be able to communicate in the US. So I think that flattened, but what now, the extra layer on top we see, is that because there have been some markets where compliance has become rushing in a wonderful, strategic fashion from the EU, for example, but has ended up with a very long tail. We see now executives, GlobeScan research, for example, shows executives in, LATAM, Asia, Africa being far more willing to talk about their corporate goals. So this is less around product marketing, but their corporate goals than those in the States and Europe, who are kind of a bit under it in terms of that, politicization and compliance. Again, that's from a corporate perspective. That's why I think this product level marketing, focusing on the consumer benefits, is again a way around that.
Mm-hmm. And just quickly, because we are out of time, but I'm gonna ask you one more question because I think is there anything else there that you see jumping out at you to comment on?
I've seen a couple on complexity, and yes, it's really hard, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. And actually, quite often when you kind of pare back about a new innovation, it particularly for climate, it's going to be done for some type of efficiency benefit. And when you pare back, you could often find some kind of product truth or consumer truth that is actually going to give them a benefit. So it is not easy. I mean, that's why we do what we do. But there are often ways of actually de-jargoning and demystifying to create something that actually means something to consumers. But the complexity thing is difficult. And price and cost, yeah, I mean, often these new innovations do take investment, CapEx investment. Often that might come with an additional cost. The one thing I'd say is the consumer won't pay more. Not right now. And I don't think they ever would. They might pay more for something which is, some incredible, brand, refill deodorant, for example. You can see people may pay more for that, but for your more price sensitive products, they aren't going to pay more. And I think, I just say that very clearly because I think we've sometimes circled around that and raised expectations internally, which haven't served us.
And just a final question, because you mentioned, choose the right channel.
Yeah.
Are there any channels, or what can you share with us about channels and which ones might be best suited to benefits-led marketing?
Absolutely. Well, internal channels, actually. Often, employees are a really good source or target.
Own,
yes,
own internal
and
channels.
actually helping your internal audiences then, as key account directors, or whatever it may be, sell that benefit-led approach is actually an often underserved channel again. And then, anything you can do, I would say at the moment, to segment your channels. So online, social, etc., a good way to explore. Conferences such as these are quite useful as well. Above-the-line advertising is good. Above-the-line advertising is terrible for behaviour change, but it's pretty good at benefit-led marketing, product benefit-led marketing.